Jake Morrison stood at the window of the USS Discovery and watched the alien world grow larger before them. The planet looked like a giant blue marble covered with silver cities that sparkled in the light of twin suns. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his 28 years of life. 3 months ago, he was just another pilot flying missions around Earth's moon, and now he was about to meet aliens for the first time in human history. Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked up beside him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Nervous, Jake?" she asked with a small smile on her face. Jake nodded and wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform pants. "A little bit, Captain," he said quietly. "I keep thinking about my little sister back home and wondering what she would say if she could see this." The captain laughed softly and patted his back. "She would probably tell you to stop worrying and go make some new friends," she said. The ship's communication system made a soft beeping sound, and Dr. Amy Sullivan's voice came through the speakers. "All crew members, please report to the main deck for final preparations," she announced. Jake took one last look at the alien planet and followed Captain Rodriguez down the hallway. His heart was beating fast and his hands were shaking a little bit, but he felt excited too. This was the moment that would change everything for humanity. The main deck was full of people running around and checking equipment. Colonel Ben Hayes was talking to his security team near the shuttle bay doors. Dr. Sullivan was reviewing her translation device for the 100th time that morning. Everyone looked nervous and excited at the same time. Jake found his spot with the other pilots and waited for instructions. "Listen up, everyone," Captain Rodriguez said loudly, so everyone could hear her. "Today we make history. The aliens we are about to meet call themselves the Zephyrians. They seem peaceful and they want to establish good relations with Earth. Remember your training and stay calm. Let me and Dr. Sullivan do most of the talking." She looked around at all the crew members. "Any questions?" she asked. Nobody said anything, so she nodded. "All right then, let's go meet our new neighbors." The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface took 30 minutes. Jake sat next to the window and watched the alien landscape pass by below them. The Zephyrian cities were unlike anything humans had ever built. Tall spires made of some kind of crystal material reached up toward the sky, and bridges of light connected the buildings together. Strange vehicles that looked like floating bubbles moved through the air between the structures. Everything seemed to glow with a soft blue light that made Jake think of deep ocean water. When they landed at the designated meeting place, Jake saw the Zephyrians waiting for them. They were tall and thin with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Their faces were similar to humans but more delicate, with large eyes that looked almost too big for their heads. They wore flowing robes that changed colors as they moved, and Jake could swear he saw small sparks of electricity dancing around their fingers. The human delegation walked down the shuttle ramp and approached the group of aliens. Dr. Sullivan held her translation device ready and Captain Rodriguez straightened her uniform jacket. Jake stayed in the back with the other junior officers, trying not to stare too obviously at the strange beings in front of them. One of the Zephyrians stepped forward and spoke in a musical voice that sounded like wind chimes. The translation device in Dr. Sullivan's hand hummed for a moment before speaking in clear English. "Welcome humans to our world. I am High Chancellor Valdris of the Zephyrian Council. We are honored to meet the people of Earth." Captain Rodriguez smiled and stepped forward to shake hands, but the alien held up his hand and touched his forehead instead. She quickly copied the gesture and touched her own forehead. "Thank you for welcoming us, Chancellor Valdris," she said. "I am Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Discovery. We come in peace and friendship." The Chancellor's large eyes seemed to sparkle with amusement. "We know this, Captain Rodriguez. Your species broadcasts your intentions quite loudly through your thoughts, though you do not realize it." Jake felt a chill run down his spine at those words. The aliens could read human thoughts. He tried to think about something boring like mathematical equations, but his mind kept wandering back to how strange and beautiful everything around him looked. That was when he noticed her. Among the group of Zephyrians stood a female who looked different from the others. She was slightly shorter and her blue skin had a more intense shimmer to it. Her robes were decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to move on their own, and a thin crown of silver metal rested on her head. But what caught Jake's attention most were her eyes. They were looking directly at him with an expression he could not understand. The alien princess, for that was clearly what she was, began walking toward the human group. The other Zephyrians seemed surprised by her movement and started whispering to each other in their musical language. She ignored them and continued, walking until she stopped directly in front of Jake. He could smell something like flowers and rain. Coming from her skin, she reached out with one slender hand and placed it gently on Jake's chest, right over his heart. Her touch felt warm and sent a strange, tingling sensation through his whole body. The other humans stepped back in alarm, and Colonel Hayes reached for his weapon before Captain Rodriguez stopped him with a sharp look. The princess looked up into Jake's eyes and spoke in perfect English without using any translation device. "The stars have guided me to you, human Jake Morrison," she said in a voice as soft as whisper. "You carry something we have long sought." Her hand pressed a little more firmly against his chest. "I can feel it burning inside you like a flame that never dies." Jake opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He felt like he was falling into those large alien eyes and losing himself completely. Around them, the other Zephyrians were talking excitedly to each other, and the human crew members were asking questions that seemed to come from very far away. All Jake could focus on was the warm hand on his chest and the strange sense that he had been waiting his whole life for this moment without knowing it. The princess smiled, and Jake saw that her teeth were small and perfectly white. "Do not be afraid, Jake Morrison," she whispered. "I have been searching for you across the galaxy for longer than you have been alive. Now that I have found you, everything will change." Jake sat in the guest quarters of the Zephyrian Palace and tried to make sense of what had happened 3 days ago. The alien princess whose name was Lirale had not spoken to him again since their first meeting, but he felt her presence everywhere he went. Sometimes he would turn around expecting to see her standing behind him, only to find empty hallways filled with the soft blue glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Captain Rodriguez knocked on his door and entered without waiting for permission. She looked tired and worried, which was not like her usual confident self. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, as she sat down on the strange furniture that seemed to mold itself to fit her body. "Dr. Sullivan has been meeting with their scientists, and we have learned some very interesting things about why Princess Lirale approached you the way she did." Jake looked up from the book he had been pretending to read. "What kind of things, Captain?" he asked, though part of him was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Rodriguez pulled out her datapad and scrolled through several pages of notes. "According to High Chancellor Valdris, the princess has a special ability that is very rare among her people. She can sense something they call the eternal flame, which apparently only exists in one species in the entire galaxy." "Let me guess," Jake said with a sinking feeling in his stomach. "Humans." The captain nodded grimly. "That's right, Jake, and it gets stranger. They have ancient writings that talk about flame bearers who would come from across the stars to help them in their darkest hour. The descriptions match humans perfectly, right down to our physical appearance and the way we think." Jake stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the Crystal City. Flying vehicles moved silently between the towers, and he could see Zephyrians walking on bridges made of solid light. Everything here was beautiful and peaceful, but he felt like he was trapped in a cage made of destiny and prophecy. "So what does this mean for me, Captain?" he asked without turning around. "I don't know, Jake," she said honestly. "But Chancellor Valdris wants to meet with all of us tomorrow to explain more about their situation. He says it involves the survival of their entire species." She stood up and walked over to stand beside him at the window. "Are you okay with all this, Jake? You didn't ask to become some kind of chosen one?" Jake laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "When I was a kid, I always dreamed about having adventures in space and meeting aliens. I never imagined it would feel so scary when it actually happened." He turned to look at his captain. "Do you think she really can read my mind?" "Like she seemed to do." Rodriguez shrugged her shoulders. "Dr. Sullivan thinks their psychic abilities are real, but limited. They can sense emotions and general thoughts, but not specific details like passwords or secret information. The princess seems to be much stronger than the others, though. She put her hand on Jake's shoulder. Try to get some rest, Jake. Tomorrow we find out what they really want from us. After the captain left, Jake lay down on the bed that adjusted itself to his body temperature and tried to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Princess Liralay's face and felt that strange tingling sensation where she had touched him. He wondered if she was somewhere in the palace thinking about him too, or if he was just another piece in some cosmic game he did not understand. The next morning, Dr. Sullivan came to get him for the meeting with the Chancellor. She looked excited in the way that scientists get when they discover something new and important. Jake, you are not going to believe what I learned from their medical scans, she said as they walked through the corridors toward the council chamber. Human brain patterns are completely unique in ways we never realized. We have neural pathways that can somehow boost and stabilize Zephyrian psychic abilities. Is that good or bad? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Sullivan smiled, but he could see worry in her eyes. That depends on what they want to use it for, she said. The good news is that the process seems to be harmless to humans. The bad news is that it requires direct physical contact and a strong emotional connection between the human and the Zephyrian. They entered a large round chamber where the other crew members were already seated around a table made of some kind of glowing crystal. High Chancellor Valdris stood at the center of the room with several other important-looking Zephyrians. Princess Liralay was there too, wearing a different crown and robes that seemed to be made of starlight itself. When Jake walked in, she looked at him with those big eyes and smiled slightly. Welcome, honored guests, Chancellor Valdris said through the translation device. Today we must speak of serious matters that affect both our peoples. Please be seated, and I will tell you the truth about why we have been searching for humans for the past 200 years. The Chancellor touched a control panel and images appeared in the air above the table. Jake saw pictures of the Zephyrian homeworld as it had looked long ago, with green forests and blue oceans instead of the crystal cities he had seen. Our world was once like yours, Valdris explained. But our sun is dying faster than we expected. In less than 50 years, it will no longer provide enough energy to support life on this planet. More images showed massive machines and structures that Jake did not recognize. Our ancestors left us a device that can reignite a dying star and give it new life for millions of years, the Chancellor continued. But the machine requires a type of mental energy that our people lost long ago. We can build the technology, but we cannot operate it. Princess Liralay stood up and spoke in her clear voice. The ancient texts described the flame-bearers as a young species with minds like burning stars. They said these beings would have the power to awaken sleeping giants and bring life to dead worlds. She looked directly at Jake. Your people have exactly the neural patterns described in our oldest writings. Colonel Hayes leaned forward with suspicion written all over his face. So you want to use our people as living batteries for your machines, he said bluntly. Chancellor Valdris held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. Not batteries, Colonel, partners. The process requires a willing bond between a human and a member of our royal family. Both beings must trust each other completely and work together to control the star reignition device. Captain Rodriguez asked the question that everyone was thinking. What are the risks to the human volunteer? The Chancellor and Princess exchanged glances before answering. We do not know, Valdris admitted. This has never been attempted before. Our computer models suggest the human would be changed by the process, gaining some of our psychic abilities, while keeping their own unique mental strength. Changed how? Dr. Sullivan asked with scientific curiosity. Princess Liralay answered this time. The human would live much longer than normal, perhaps as long as we do. Their mind would be linked permanently to their Zephyrian partner, sharing thoughts and emotions across any distance. They would become something new, neither fully human nor Zephyrian. Jake felt everyone's eyes turning toward him and realized that somehow he had become the center of this cosmic drama without choosing it. Princess Liralay continued to look at him with an expression that seemed both hopeful and sad. The choice must be freely made, she said softly. We cannot force this bond on anyone. But if no one volunteers, both our species may be destroyed when the star fails and the darkness between worlds claims us all. Jake spent the next week working closely with Princess Lirelei to understand the ancient star device. They met every day in a special chamber deep beneath the palace where the original machine blueprints were carved into crystal walls. The princess would place her hand on his arm, and suddenly he could see the technical drawings in his mind as clearly as if someone had downloaded them directly into his brain. Your mind processes the information so quickly, Lirelei said with wonder in her voice as they studied a particularly complex diagram. It took our best scientists years to understand what you grasped in minutes. Jake looked at the swirling patterns of energy conduits and power cores that somehow made perfect sense to him now. It feels familiar, he said slowly. Like I have seen this design before in dreams. The princess moved closer to him, and Jake caught that scent of flowers and rain that seemed to follow her everywhere. Perhaps you have, she said quietly. The bond between us grows stronger each day. I can feel your thoughts touching mine even when we are apart. Jake knew what she meant because he had been experiencing the same thing. Sometimes he would know things about Zephyrian culture or technology that no human should understand, and other times he could sense Lirelei's emotions from across the palace. Dr. Sullivan visited them often to monitor the changes happening to both Jake and the princess. Her medical scanners showed that Jake's brain was developing new neural pathways at an incredible rate, while Lirelei was experiencing human emotions for the first time in her long life. This is fascinating, Dr. Sullivan said as she reviewed the latest test results. Jake, your psychic sensitivity has increased by 300% in just 1 week. And Princess, your emotional responses are becoming much more complex and intense. Jake noticed the changes in himself every day. He could sense the moods of everyone around him, and sometimes he caught glimpses of their surface thoughts without trying. Colors seemed brighter, and sounds had new layers of meaning that he had never noticed before. But the most dramatic change was his connection to Lirelei. When she was happy, he felt warm inside, and when she was sad, it was like a cold wind blowing. Through his heart, Colonel Hayes grew more suspicious as the days passed. He cornered Jake one evening after dinner and spoke in a low voice so the aliens would not overhear. Jake, I think they are brainwashing you somehow. You are not acting like yourself anymore. Jake looked at the colonel and realized he could sense the man's fear and distrust like a bitter taste in his mouth. I am still me, Ben, he said, using the colonel's first name for the first time. I'm just becoming more than I was before. That's exactly what I am worried about, Hayes replied. What if this bond thing is just a trap? What if they plan to take over your mind completely and use you to attack Earth? Jake shook his head and tried to explain. It doesn't work that way, Ben. The bond goes both ways. I can feel Lirelei's thoughts and emotions just as much as she can feel mine. She is not trying to control me. But even as he said the words, Jake wondered if Colonel Hayes might be right. How could he be sure that what he was feeling was real and not some kind of alien manipulation? That night he decided to test the connection by trying to reach Lirelei's mind while she slept. He lay in his bed and focused on the warm feeling he got when she was near him. Suddenly he was seeing through her eyes and feeling what she felt. Lirelei was not asleep, but standing on a balcony looking up at the dying star that hung red and dim in the night sky. Through their link, Jake experienced her memories of growing up knowing that her entire civilization would end unless she found the right human to bond with. He felt her loneliness and the terrible pressure of being responsible for billions of lives, but he also felt something else that made his heart race. Lirelei was thinking about him not just as a tool to save her people, but as someone she was beginning to love in ways that her species had never experienced before. The human emotions she was developing through their bond were teaching her what it meant to care about one person more than duty or destiny. Jake, her voice whispered in his mind. I know you are here with me. Can you forgive me for burdening you with our problems? He tried to send thoughts back to her and was amazed when it worked. There is nothing to forgive, Lirelei. We are in this together now. He felt her surprise and joy at his mental response. "You learn so quickly," she said. "Our connection is stronger than anything in our historical records. I think we are becoming something that has never existed before." Jake stood up from his bed and walked to his own balcony where he could see her figure in the distance. "What are we becoming?" he asked through their link. "I do not know," she admitted. "But I can feel your strength making me braver, and I hope my knowledge is making you wiser. Perhaps together we can be more than either of our species could be alone." Jake felt a surge of affection from her that was so strong it took his breath away. "I have lived for 200 years, Lirelei continued, but I never understood what humans call love until I met you." The next morning, Dr. Sullivan ran more tests and discovered something that alarmed her. "Jake, your DNA is actually changing," she said with worry in her voice. "Some of your chromosomes are taking on characteristics similar to Zephyrian genetics. At this rate, you will be more alien than human within a month." Jake looked at the test results and felt surprisingly calm about the news. "Is that necessarily a bad thing, Dr. Sullivan?" he asked. "I don't know, Jake," she replied honestly. "But Captain Rodriguez is concerned about what happens if you become too different to return to Earth with us. And there are other issues, too. Colonel Hayes reports that some of the crew are getting nervous about your changing abilities. Yesterday you knew that Pilot Martinez was sick before he showed any symptoms." Jake realized that his enhanced senses were making the other humans uncomfortable. He was picking up on their emotions and physical conditions without meaning to, and it made them feel like their privacy was being invaded. "Maybe it would be better if I stayed on the Zephyrian ship while we work on the star device," he suggested. Princess Lirelei appeared in the doorway of the medical bay, as if she had sensed his distress from across the palace. She had been doing that more often lately, showing up exactly when Jake needed her most. "Is everything all right?" she asked, though Jake knew she could feel his emotional state through their bond. "Dr. Sullivan thinks the changes in me might be happening too fast," Jake explained. Lirelei walked over and took his hand in hers, sending waves of calm through his nervous system. "The ancient texts speak of this," she said to Dr. Sullivan. "When the flame-bearers bond with our people, both sides must transform to meet in the middle. Jake is becoming partially Zephyrian, just as I am becoming partially human." Dr. Sullivan looked fascinated despite her concerns. "So this is normal?" she asked. Lirelei nodded. "According to our oldest writings, yes." "But Jake," she turned to look at him seriously, "you need to understand that once the transformation is complete, there will be no going back. You will live for thousands of years, and your connection to me will be permanent. Are you prepared for such a commitment?" Jake looked into those large alien eyes that had become so dear to him and realized that he had already made his choice. "Weeks ago, yes," he said simply. "I want to help save your people, and I want to stay with you. Whatever I am becoming, it feels right." He squeezed her hand and felt her joy and relief flooding through their bond like warm sunlight. Colonel Hayes chose that moment to enter the medical bay with his hand resting on his weapon. "That's what I was afraid of," he said grimly. "Jake, you are not thinking clearly anymore. These aliens have done something to your mind to make you compliant." Jake turned to face the colonel and realized he could sense the man's genuine fear and concern beneath his suspicion and anger. "Ben, I know you are trying to protect me," Jake said gently, "but I am exactly where I choose to be." The Zephyrian Council of Elders gathered in the great crystal chamber to decide Jake's fate. High Chancellor Valdris stood before 5 ancient beings whose skin had turned almost transparent with age and whose eyes glowed with inner light. Jake could feel their immense psychic power pressing against his mind like a gentle but irresistible force. "The human shows promise," said Elder Thessarian in a voice like wind through crystal chimes. "But we must be certain he can withstand the full power of the star device before we risk everything on this bonding." The eldest of them, a being so old that his name had been forgotten, spoke in thoughts rather than words. "Let him face the trials of unity. If he survives, we will know he is truly worthy." Princess Lirelei stepped forward with fear radiating from her in waves that Jake could feel through their bond. "Honored elders, the trials were designed for our people, not for humans. The psychic pressure alone could destroy his mind. Jake placed his hand on her arm and sent her a pulse of calm confidence. "I can do this, Lirle," he said quietly. "We have come too far to turn back now." Elder Valdris explained the nature of the trials to the assembled humans. The candidate must enter the Chamber of Unity, a structure built by our ancestors that responds to both mental strength and pure intention. Inside, he will face 3 challenges that will test his compatibility with our princess and his commitment to our cause. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward with concern written all over her face. "What kind of challenges, Chancellor?" she asked. "The trial of mind, where he must navigate a maze created by his own thoughts and fears. The trial of heart, where he must prove his emotional bond with Princess Lirale is genuine and not mere infatuation. And finally, the trial of spirit, where he must demonstrate that he truly understands what it means to sacrifice himself for others." The Chancellor's large eyes focused on Jake. "Many of our own people have failed these trials. For a human, the risks are even greater." Jake felt Colonel Hayes tense up beside him and knew the man was about to object. "Ben," he said before the colonel could speak, "this is my choice to make. I understand the risks." Hayes grabbed Jake's shoulder and spun him around. "No, you don't understand, Jake. You can't understand because they have been messing with your head for weeks. The Jake Morrison I knew would never volunteer for a suicide mission." "Maybe the Jake Morrison you knew was not brave enough to do what needs to be done," Jake replied calmly. He could sense Colonel Hayes' anger and frustration, but also the genuine care the man had for him. "Ben, you have been like an older brother to me, and I know you want to protect me. But some things are more important than staying safe." Dr. Sullivan ran one final medical scan on Jake before the trials began. "Your neural patterns are unlike anything I have ever seen," she said with amazement in her voice. "Human and Zephyrian brain structures are actually merging in some areas. Whatever happens in there, you won't be the same person who comes out." Jake nodded and tried to project more confidence than he actually felt. "I know, Dr. Sullivan. That's the whole point." The Chamber of Unity stood in the center of the palace like a mountain made of living crystal. As Jake approached it with Princess Lirale beside him, the structure began to glow with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. The entrance was a doorway shaped like a perfect circle that seemed to lead into infinite darkness. "Once you enter, I cannot help you," Lirale said as they stopped before the threshold. "The chamber will create challenges based on your own mind and memories. You must face them alone." She took both of his hands in hers and looked into his eyes with an expression of love and terror. "If something goes wrong, if you are dying, in there I will sense it through our bond. Promise me you will let me know if you need me to pull you out." Jake squeezed her hands and tried to memorize every detail of her face. "I promise, Lirale. But I also promise that I am coming back to you." He kissed her forehead and felt a surge of warmth pass between them. Then he turned and walked through the circular doorway into the darkness beyond. The first thing Jake experienced was silence, so complete that he could hear his own blood flowing through his veins. Then the darkness around him began to shift and change, forming walls and corridors that stretched away in all directions. He realized he was standing in a maze, but the walls were made of his own memories and fears projected into solid form. As he began to walk down the first corridor, images from his childhood appeared on the walls around him. He saw himself as a scared little boy hiding in his bedroom closet while his parents fought downstairs. He saw his first day of school when the other kids laughed at his secondhand clothes. He saw every moment of failure and embarrassment from his entire life playing out in vivid detail. "This is the trial of mind," a voice said from everywhere and nowhere. "You must find your way to the center of the maze, but every wrong turn will force you to relive your worst memories." Jake took a deep breath and chose a path at random. Immediately, the walls around him changed to show the day his father left home and never came back. The pain of that memory hit him like a physical blow, but he kept walking. Hour after hour, he wandered through the maze of his own psyche, facing fears and regrets he had buried for years. But gradually, he began to notice something strange. The memories that hurt the most were also teaching him something important. His childhood poverty had made him appreciate simple things that others took for granted. His father's abandonment had taught him the value of loyalty and commitment. Every failure had made him stronger and more determined to succeed. When he finally reached the center of the maze, Jake found himself standing in a perfect replica of the bridge of the USS Discovery. But instead of his crewmates, the bridge was filled with all the people he had ever cared about. His mother and sister stood beside Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Sullivan. Even Colonel Hayes was there, looking at him with pride instead of suspicion. "This is the trial of heart," the voice said. "Choose who matters most to you, for you can save only one when the star device activates. All others will be lost in the cosmic forces you unleash." Jake looked around at all the faces of people he loved and realized this was an impossible choice. How could he pick his family over his friends or his crewmates over Princess Lirelei, who was not even present in this illusion? Then he understood what the trial was really testing. "I refuse to choose," he said loudly. Love is not about picking favorites or abandoning some people to save others. Real love finds a way to protect everyone. The illusion began to dissolve around him, and he heard what sounded like approval in the mysterious voice. The final trial transported him to the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, but now the dying sun hung huge and red in the sky, casting everything in the color of blood. Around him, millions of Zephyrians looked up at their failing star with despair in their large eyes. In his hands appeared a device that he somehow knew was the key to the star reignition machine. "This is the trial of spirit," the voice explained. "To save this world, you must sacrifice not just your human form, but your human identity. You will live forever, but you will never again be fully one of your own species. Are you prepared to give up everything that makes you who you are?" Jake looked at the device in his hands and felt the weight of entire civilizations resting on his decision. He thought about Earth and his sister who would wonder what happened to her big brother. He thought about his friends on the Discovery, who would have to return home and explain that he had chosen aliens over humanity. He thought about never again eating pizza or watching movies or doing any of the simple human things he had always taken for granted. Then he thought about Princess Lirelei and the love they had discovered together. He thought about the billions of Zephyrians who would die if their sun failed. He thought about the amazing new abilities he was developing and the chance to explore the galaxy as something more than just human. "I am ready," he said and pressed the activation button on the device. The crystal chamber around him exploded with light so bright that it seemed to burn through his very soul, changing him on levels he did not even know existed. Jake opened his eyes to find himself lying on a platform of crystal in the center of the Chamber of Unity. Princess Lirelei knelt beside him with tears streaming down her blue cheeks, but he could sense through their bond that these were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "You did it," she whispered as she helped him sit up. "The trials accepted you completely. I felt every moment of your struggle through our connection." Jake looked at his hands and saw that his skin now had a faint shimmer, like Lirelei's, though it remained essentially human in color and texture. When he concentrated, he could feel new pathways in his mind that connected him not just to the princess, but to the vast network of crystal technology that powered the Zephyrian civilization. "I can sense the star device," he said with wonder in his voice. "It's like a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened." Dr. Sullivan rushed into the chamber with her medical scanners and immediately began taking readings. "Incredible," she muttered as she reviewed the results. "Jake, your life signs show you could live for thousands of years now. Your brain is processing information at speeds that should be impossible for any biological organism. And the energy readings I am getting from you are off the charts." Captain Rodriguez appeared behind Dr. Sullivan with a mixture of pride and sadness on her face. "How do you feel, Jake?" she asked quietly. He stood up slowly and tested his new senses, amazed by how much more he could perceive than before. "Different, Captain? Better in some ways, but also like I am saying goodbye to something I can never get back." He looked at his commanding officer, with eyes that now seemed to hold depths of knowledge she could not fathom. "I am still me, but I am also something new." High Chancellor Valdris entered the chamber with the Council of Elders behind him. The trials have confirmed what Princess Lirelei sensed from the beginning, he announced. Jake Morrison is the flame bearer we have waited centuries to find. But the real test comes now when we attempt to reignite our dying star. The Chancellor gestured toward the chamber walls where new patterns of light were beginning to appear. The star device is awakening in response to your transformed presence, Jake. Soon we must travel to the solar collection station and begin the reignition sequence. Colonel Hayes pushed past the Zephyrian officials and confronted Jake directly. This is insane, Jake. You are talking about playing with forces that could destroy entire star systems. What if something goes wrong? What if you lose control? Jake could sense the Colonel's fear and frustration, but also his genuine concern for Jake's safety and the welfare of both species. Ben, I understand your worries, Jake said calmly, but the process has already begun. I can feel the star device connecting to my consciousness even now. If we don't act soon, the instabilities in their sun will reach a point where even the ancient machine cannot help. He placed his hand on Colonel Hayes' shoulder. Trust me one more time, Ben. I know what I am doing. The journey to the solar collection station took them to a massive structure floating in space between the Zephyrian homeworld and their dying sun. The station was built from the same crystal,